Hello, I'm Fran Pareto, the owner-proprietor of Eternity Road. Normally, I would have taken the sentiments that are going to appear in this video and I would have committed them to pixels. I would have written them out as prose and posted them as the essay of the day. But I'm afraid I can't do that. I came back from Mass just a little while ago. It's a Catholic thing. If you know any Catholics, you'll know all about it. Mass is a regular Sunday occurrence for us, and we tend to look forward to it. Among other things, it induces a certain serenity. It helps us to bleed away the tensions of the week, prepare ourselves for the week to come. All ritual prayer is like that. That's one of the reasons we have it. It helps us to calm down. It helps us to attain some sort of state of serenity in which we can face the rigors of our lives. Very, very valuable thing. But that aspect of ritual prayer is not confined to ritual prayer. It can be observed in anything that is regularly repeated. Repetition has a calming effect. That which is frequent becomes normal. And we're not supposed to get exercised over what's normal. Normal it tends to be taken as a synonym for that which is beyond our power to change. And so, when we see that to which we have become accustomed to think of as normal, we tend to react to it in a very placid way. We tend to let it pass by and not to make too much of it. And this is not merely an effect upon our overall demeanor, our overall level of excitement, if you will. It also has an effect on the conscience. We who pray are not the only people who know this. Some years ago, the great columnist Russell Baker of the New York Times wrote a column called Stomach Bulge Defense. I'm going to read you a bit of it now. The difference between barbarity now and in other times is that now everyone sees it on television. Massacres, assassinations, bombings, even genocide used to be conducted in comparative privacy. Those who had witnessed or survived them came back and told us about them through soft filters of time, memory, distance, and words. It was hard to believe that such things had really happened. It's easy to disbelieve mere witnesses and survivors when they tell us of things we'd rather not believe. But they were too close to events. They were overwrought, inclined to exaggerate, given to lapses in bad taste, apt to overdramatize for effect. So the world seemed a better place then. It wasn't, of course. It was only more conveniently remote from common experience. Now that television sits in the living room, ready to show us the absolute worst at the touch of a switch, we have to construct other defenses. Watching the late news the other night, I saw what might be called the bulging stomach defense. The man reading the news began by warning that we were about to see some film we might think offensive, something we wouldn't want the children to witness. He advised us to clear them out of the room, a piece of advice that was probably as well intended as it was calculated to make every child in Baltimore battle for his right to view. Then we saw scenes of horror from Vietnam. Some people who had been in an open boat for several days, fleeing from the enemy, had arrived at a besieged port. The boat was filled with dead children, whom we saw briefly, open-eyed. Bodies wrapped in shrouds. An apparently legless woman being carried ashore. Mothers weeping in agony. Some of the children who died in the flight had been buried at sea, said the reporter. It was harrowing stuff. We could imagine those burials. Then a handsome young woman appeared on the screen. She had just purchased a superior brand of pantyhose. They performed wonders for her figure, she said. They even suppressed her stomach bulge. The picture shifted. Another handsome young woman. This one had made a study of headache nostrums. She discussed them briefly and recommended a particular brand. Memory blurs at this point, but I know the news went on as it does every night. Someone may have discussed the hazard of dying battery and told us how to avert it. No doubt a mother of 32 instructed her daughter of 28, and all the rest of us, which brand of tomato paste was the most powerful at holding a marriage intact. I don't know, but these are the kinds of things commonly used in the bulging stomach defense. Baker wrote that in the mid-70s, some 35 years ago. The introduction of television to American homes has indeed added a new set of rituals to our lives, the evening news. And the TV news tends to follow certain papers, in particular the New York Times, rather slavishly. It's been said that whatever the Times covers on Monday will be on the TV news Monday evening and Tuesday morning. Thus, there's a small group of people who have essentially identical outlooks and preferences, who believe themselves worthy to mold public opinion, who have great sway over a very powerful mass medium, the most powerful known to us, and who are equipped with the means to make, over time, large-scale changes in what we consider normal, and therefore beyond our power to change. I have a dear friend I haven't seen in some years. His name is Lynn Chestnut, and he made the observation that 50 years ago, most of what we see on television would have caused us to go for our guns, at least if we were close enough to do anything about it. But of course, it's all been made normal now, beyond changing. And besides, we're not allowed to carry guns. But the objective horrors of what we're being shown remain as they are. What's changed is that we've been rendered numb by repetition. These things are now normal. There's too much truth in what Russell Baker wrote. The interleaving of scenes of horror with commercials for pantyhose and tomato paste has definitely had an effect upon our ability to discriminate between what should cause us merely to jot down a note about which supermarket to visit tomorrow, and what should cause us to, in Lynn's words, go for our guns. Baker lamented the advancing crudity, but he gave no indication of being conscious that there might just be a plan to numb our consciences, that this might not be accidental, a mere consequence of the news's use of that which is dramatic and lurid to gain eyeballs and market share. Not too long after Baker wrote that column, Paddy Chayefsky's fabulous movie Network was aired to audiences here in the United States. If you haven't seen it, the central character, Howard Beale, is a newsman who, upon being told that he's being fired, suddenly decides to become quite candid about what he thinks is going on in the world, a privilege he was never permitted while he was on salary. Beale articulated the popular rage over things which, as he said, we were all too anxious not even to talk about. We were all too anxious to say, "Give me my condominium apartment and my steel-belted radials and leave me alone, and I won't say anything." Network executives recognized the value of such an approach. It could be used to channel the popular rage, and so they gave Beale his own show, the mad prophet of the airwaves, and they used him. They used him to sell pantyhose and tomato paste and all the other items that are used in the bulging stomach defense. The end of the movie had Beale killed for ratings. You see, he had become slightly boring. But it suggested that even a useful channel can be dispatched without awakening popular consciousness about what's being done to it. 35 years ago. That movie aired 35 years ago. What about today? What about our contemporary horrors? What about Islam? We hear nightly of women being mutilated, honor killed, stoned to death for the crime of having been raped. We hear about the ongoing slaughter of religious minorities in Muslim-majority countries, especially Christians. If you've been paying any attention to the news at all, you know what's being done to the Coptic Christians of Egypt, with the connivance of the Egyptian government, though they deny it. You know that Iran is pressing for the means to destroy Israel. It's trying to develop nuclear weapons. And the rest of the world is looking on as if it were no problem of theirs. You know that Muslim immigrants are being permitted to import their horrors to all the nations of Europe and to quite a few places in America. If you haven't heard the names Islamburg, Sheikh Gilani Lane, Hamtramck, Michigan, if you haven't heard about the Ground Zero Mosque, congratulations on a really long nap. Then there are other matters. We have death cults in this country. Some of them are outcroppings of worldwide death cults, and some of them are uniquely our own. We've had 50 million abortions in the past 37 years. Infanticide is now a common practice. Oh, it's practiced very quietly, but it's far more common than you'd care to think. We have Jack Kevorkian being lionized by many, many persons who believe that you have a right to be assisted to your death. And you have a thing called the Groningen Protocol, developed in Europe, which actually says that physicians, suitably certified by the state, should have the power and authority to terminate the lives of those they feel have no quality of life. You have Peter Singer, noted Princeton ethicist, who believes that parents should have, for about a month, the option of killing their newborn. After all, it's only a retroactive abortion. You have radical environmentalists such as Eric Pianka, David Graeber, and so forth, calling for the right virus, because what they would like to see is a world free of humanity. You have organizations such as the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement, which are pushing that agenda as well. You have, in many states of the Union, powerful political pressure for the compulsory surrender of transplantable organs from the recently deceased, whether or not the deceased specified in his pre-death wishes that he wanted that to be the case. You have embryonic stem cell research, the creation of embryos specifically to be killed, and the components used in laboratory experiments. You have the recent government takeover of healthcare, such that in the very easily foreseen future, we will have bureaucrats telling us what we may and may not purchase in the way of medical products and services. You have a deliberate, open-faced emasculation of our military at a time when to keep it strong and ready to go to work is probably the most important time in all our history. We have a president who kowtows to dictators and who snubs our allies. We have forces pressing for the draining of all meaning from the word marriage. We have a federal government doing its damnedest to strangle the energy industries. Oil, coal, nuclear, it doesn't matter. They're hostile to all of them. We have the deliberate diversion of food resources to the production of low-grade fuels. We have, in various places around the country, public officials who feel it's their right and duty to tell us how and what we should eat. Why aren't you outraged? I'm going to read you one more thing. It's from a man whose name you might have heard, a Frenchman. Once I had definitely refused to kill. I doomed myself to an exile that can never end. I leave it to others to make history. I know, too, that I'm not qualified to pass judgment on them. There's something lacking in my mental makeup. It prevents me from being a rational murderer. It's a deficiency. But as things are, I'm willing to be as I am. I've learned modesty. All I maintain is that on this earth there are pestilences and there are victims, and it's up to us, as far as possible, not to join forces with the pestilences. Albert Camus. Good night.